Good evening. Great to have you with us as we wrap up the week. Remember the days of lockdowns, schooling our kids at home and avoiding even family members? Well, much of that is over, but what about the pandemic itself? After all we've been through, seems sort of hard to conceive, but that could soon be over as well. And that's the Pulse of America tonight. It comes amid a lot of good news that we'd like to share with you tonight, and we will. But a call that at the end of this pandemic is near comes from a very strong voice, too. Former FDA Commissioner Dr. Scott Gottlieb tied it to the Biden administration's vaccine mandate, an issue that's certainly been controversial and provoked protests across the country, including among first responders. But Dr. Gottlieb says once the federal mandate kicks in on January 4th, the pandemic could be, possibly, maybe, hopefully, over. So we will see. But it comes as Pfizer says its antiviral pill is highly effective in treating COVID, cutting the risk of hospitalization or death by almost 90% in high-risk adults. That's one of the innovations Dr. Gottlieb was talking about there. And on top of that, Pfizer says that pill is going to cut the risk of hospitalization, as we mentioned, down almost 90% is what we're talking about, especially in at-risk adults. Another positive development. We told you we have a lot of good news, and we do. Here's more. International travel into the U.S. reopens next week. Great for hotels, restaurants, tourism, and airlines, too. In fact, Delta Airlines says its bookings from outside the U.S. have jumped 450% as vaccinated travelers from 33 countries prepare for that reopening next week. Sure sounds like a promising end of the pandemic, doesn't it? Or at least, again, progress. The unemployment rate ticked down to 4.6%. Impressive for sure. We're heading in the right direction, but still short of the 3.5% rate pre-COVID. According to reports, we have now recovered 80% of the jobs lost at the height of the pandemic last year. Oh, and by the way, the markets are at record highs. Great news. Lots of it, as promised, and hopefully it all signals the end of the pandemic, as Dr. Gottlieb said. Let's hope. That would be the best news of all. And that is where we begin tonight with Rich Liu, Chief Operating Officer of business technology firm Lattice. Rich, a lot of good news in there. Is this a reflection of what you're seeing with the businesses you work with?
Absolutely. I think what we're seeing right now is, not only are businesses starting to recover and really think about moving forward, they're really thinking about how they want to be positioned to best perform and attract the best employees and retain and engage them, particularly in this environment where employees have a lot more power and really the control in their hands to choose where they want to be in a way that they never have before.
Where are they moving forward and how, Rich? Because I know we've talked a lot about whether they're going to bring their workers back into the office, but you're talking about much more than that, trying to recruit and attract the most attractive candidates.
Yeah, it's a great question, right? Across the industries, across segments, across the country, we're seeing companies sort of try to figure out what does the new future look like in a world where, work might be hybrid, work might be more remote. How do we actually flex around this and create productivity still? And from what we're trying to think about is how do we help support these companies no matter where they are? Because, what employees might have been looking for years ago or even quarters ago was, okay, let's go find a great paycheck, great job. Nowadays, they're looking for far more, right? What are the companies that are going to invest in me? They're going to give me transparency and engagement around how we're steering the company and help me understand what it takes to become an IC to a manager to a director or VP. Right. Employees are really looking for more of that now than they have ever before, and that's something we're seeing pretty clearly in companies looking to help figure out how to solve for that.
And they have a lot of leverage as well, as you point out. I'm wondering, we've heard so much about all of the job openings and people quitting. What was it, like 4 million people in August resigning, and to your point, trying to find new work or work that they might like better or think pays more. Is this a sign, you think, that people are now looking for work again and are going to go back to work?
Absolutely, right. You heard of the stats around the Great Resignation and what some have coined, people leaving the workforce. Yes, there are certainly stats that show that's happened to some extent, but what we're finding is really the pandemic has helped people stop and reconnect with what actually matters to me, right? Beyond the paycheck, beyond a perk here or there, what are the things I actually want to solve for? And we're increasingly seeing people say, I want that career transparency, I want that development, I want a culture I want to be a part of. And really what the pandemic has done is helped us stop and pause, but also created a landscape where now employers are realizing we can hire employees from all over the country instead of just a local area. And so you're seeing those two dynamics sit on top of each other and create this unprecedented level of movement in our workforce. And that's a lot of what we're seeing right now. But as you said, the employees really hold the chips now, and that's a really powerful thing.
Rich Liu, Chief Operating Officer of business technology firm Lattice. Great to have you tonight. Thanks for the time.
Great to be with you. Thank you.
COVID cases go down, hiring goes up. Is it that simple? And if so, have we turned a corner? Let's ask our next two guests, Achilles Larrea, CEO of Larrea Wealth Management, and our friend Lan Hee Chen. It's great to have both of you. Let's start, I guess, with you, if we can, Achilles, because I still remember hearing that the first rule of COVID economy, or economics, if you will, is take care of the virus. And it certainly feels, at least, like we've turned a corner here. Do you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. We've definitely turned a corner, and we're actually approaching the end where we're starting to see this Delta variant starting to dissipate, and we're starting to see more people going back to work. Those employment numbers were so important. People stepped up, and they're coming in droves back to work. We're still not at that, we had 4 million less working pre-COVID, but we're definitely moving the needle along, and more people. I mean, just this month alone, we saw 531,000 versus the 450 projected, and that bodes well for moving forward and getting back to normal, whatever that means now. It's a new normal.
Right. Lan Hee, you worked with Mitt Romney as a policy director and have spent some time looking at a lot of these issues, I know. The economy's humming along. The markets are high. Are you worried at all about the impact this vaccine mandate could have on companies that have more than 100 employees?
Yeah, I think the question, Joe, is where we are with respect to what capacity is in our economy in terms of the labor markets. And I think part of the challenge we're facing is that there's some number of people who probably are not going to go back to work because they're not comfortable going back to work. Physically, they're not comfortable, or they've decided to retire, or in other cases, they're producing some concerns about going back to work because of these kinds of mandates. So I think what you have to realize is that the vaccine mandate problem is part of a bigger challenge we have around evaluating what full capacity in our labor markets looks like and what that actually means. And so until we have a better handle over these next several months of what actual full capacity is, it's going to be very difficult for us to evaluate how much more room we have left to go in this recovery.
Achilles, thousands of intelligence officers could be fired for not getting the shot. There are reports now that trucking companies might ditch their federal contracts to avoid it. The fear is, now clearly a lot of people have gotten the vaccine and are following this mandate, but their fear is that it won't take much of a disruption to actually create a big disruption.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we saw that with the Delta variant. Could we also see that with people coming off the payrolls? But we also have to remember, Pfizer just came out with this new technology with these pills. So we may start to see people coming back to work in that sector, or there could be what I think is going to happen, more a negotiation between the rank and file and their employers, and at the same time we could see them start to move. We think that at Larrea Wealth, we think that the employers know what has to be done. America's starting to roll up their sleeves and move forward in the direction of, hey, we're ready to lead the world again, and this is just the beginning.
Lan Hee, the president took a victory lap today. Deserved?
Well, I think it's got to be very careful because there are a number of things out there that are sneaking concerns, I think, in terms of the economic position of many Americans going forward. The most obvious one, of course, is inflation and the potential that inflation has to eat away at gains, the potential it has to put pressure on families as we approach the holidays. So certainly inflationary pressure is one issue. And then you have supply chain problems. The ability of the supply chain to provide what is needed and wanted later this year, I think those are concerns as well. And the president has political issues as well in terms of his ability to get across the finish line this massive social spending package,
right.
And still unable, by the way, to get the infrastructure package across the finish line too. So he's got some worries, and I would be very careful if I were him to celebrate prematurely.
Well, it does look, Achilles, like there could be a vote on those two packages, or at least the infrastructure bill tonight. We'll see where that goes. But your opinion on what impact that would have, these two packages, if passed, on the economy and jobs?
Yeah, it's going to have a huge impact on jobs. Several companies are going to benefit from this, amongst them being the home builders and the like. But what we really should be careful is inflation at this point. What is the Fed going to do from this point on? I think they're going to be forced in Q2 2022. They're going to have to be forced to start raising rates. Some people have said June or July of 2022. I think they're going to be forced earlier than that. I think wage pressure, I think the economy is going to force them to act earlier and be more aggressive. We could see 3 to 4 interest rate increases by the Fed next year.
All right. Thank you both for the look ahead. Lanhee Chen, we should also mention, is running for California Comptroller. Good luck with your campaign. And it's good to have Achilles Larea as well of Larea Wealth Management. The saga over payments from migrant families separated at the border has been a hot topic this week. We'll be sending 6 and possibly 7-figure checks to families that were separated under the last administration. That story is coming up next. And with potentially thousands more heading to our southern border in what's being called the mother of all caravans, what will the Border Patrol officers do when they arrive? We're going to speak with a journalist on the other side of the wall. And don't forget, you can join us on social media at the Donlon Report on Twitter.
One of the things that we have to remember why we're in this place that we are today is because we had an administration that had an inhumane, immoral policy that was taking babies away from their families, from their mothers.
That was White House Principal Deputy Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre on the payments the Biden administration is reportedly planning to make to some migrant families. The payments have come to the spotlight since the Wall Street Journal reported the administration plans to pay $450,000 to families who were separated under the Trump administration's zero-tolerance policy in 2018. Notably, when President Biden was asked about the report, he called it garbage.
So this is a garbage report?
Yeah.
Okay. So
$450,000 per person. Is that what you're saying?
That was separated from a family member at the border under the last administration.
That's not going to happen.
So the next day, the White House press office clarified the president was calling the amount of the payments garbage, but he's generally comfortable with the reparations. Let's get more on this from our next guest. Here to help us answer that is the president and of the group that we have called on here to help us, the CEO of the National Immigration Forum. His name is Ali Noorani. Ali, my apologies there. I've had to catch up with a couple of things. But listen, let's start with clarifying what's going on here, because the president didn't really help, I don't think. This sounds like it's going to happen, though.
Well, I mean, what's happening here is that these families, remember, the Trump administration separated well over 5,000 families, parents from their children over the course of 2018. Nearly 300 remain separated, in essence, their children whose parents cannot be found. So what the president is trying to do is say, okay, what is the appropriate reparation to pay these families? I mean, these families with the ACLU have filed a suit, and they're in settlement negotiations. I think that the administration needs to do 2 things. One, make sure from a policy perspective this never happens again. And number 2, offer these families in the least a path to permanent residency and U.S. citizenship in the United States. And then let the courts determine, in essence, what the appropriate settlement amount is.
Is it up to the courts, Ali? Is that how this is determined?
Well, right now what they're doing is negotiating directly with the Department of Justice. If the White House and Department of Justice say, okay, they're not going to settle, then ACLU can go to the courts. But this is, a White House that wants to allow the Department of Justice to operate freely and free from politics. But this is going to be a very, very sticky situation, for the Department of Justice, much less the White House, given particularly the fact today that Senators McConnell and Grassley sent a letter to the Department of Justice asking for clarification of exactly what's going to happen.
You could parse his statement, I guess, in many ways, Ali, and that is whether he was calling the number garbage, whether he was calling that number per person garbage. Is it more going to be like families? But the number we found today from DHS was that some 2,000 kids have not been reunited with their families. How much money could this be?
Well, some estimates, if it was at that $450,000 number, it could be as high as $1 billion in total. But at the end of the day, I think we have to keep in mind is that many of these families, they were actually asking for asylum and protection here in the United States. And that's when the Trump administration decided they were going to separate these parents from their children. So, you know, we have to go back to the root of the problem here. And the root of the problem is that the Trump administration put in place an incredibly cruel policy, and that the Biden administration now has to figure out how to not just reunite these families, but to make them whole emotionally and financially.
Yeah, I'm sure you've heard from critics who say, well, wait a minute here, we're paying illegal immigrants. So that's an important clarification you make, Ali. These are folks who came here seeking asylum. They hadn't snuck into the country illegally. But the question here is the why. As much as people might not like the policy or certainly the end result of this, was it illegal? I mean, you said it was cruel. Was it illegal?
Whether or not it was illegal, it has been proven over and over again that border policy that is shaped in a way to deter migration fails. Now, we saw this over the course of the Bush administration, the Obama administration, and under Trump, it was obviously kind of raised to really harsh, incredibly harsh level. Deterrence through deportation and enforcement does not work. And that's why ultimately we need a functioning immigration system that creates legal pathways for people to be able to enter the country legally. Because right now what's happening is that we've in essence outsourced our entire immigration system at the southern border to the cartels. They're the only ones winning right now. And so, you know, yes, we need to make these families whole. We need to make sure that they are treated humanely, but we also need a functioning immigration system where we're just going to have versions of this situation playing out over and over and over again.
Yeah, that's well put, for sure. What would you say to critics, Ali, on the way out here who argue this is only going to encourage more of this?
Right now, what is encouraging more migration to the United States, particularly from Central America, is the fact that our immigration system is a complete disaster. Like I said, the cartels have been able to monetize the movement of people, so they're selling a dream to desperate migrants coming from Central America, so that they are moving people, but they're also moving drugs through the southern border. So this is a great business for the cartels, and one way to take that business away is to actually put forward a functioning immigration system. And you know, to begin to dismantle these cartels, but more importantly, ensure that these families who are seeking economic opportunity and quite frankly can help us move forward as a country, provide them a legal way to move forward.
Well, we've been trying for decades, and we haven't quite figured it out. Ali Noorani, it's great to have you, President and CEO of National Immigration Forum. Thanks for the time. Enjoy the weekend.
Thank you.
More news now from the border. The migrant caravan heading north through Mexico and to the U.S. Joining me now, immigration and drug trafficking journalist Luis Chaparro. Luis, it's good to have you as well. What's the latest? You've traveled with this caravan. What's the latest your sources are telling you about it?
Joe, thank you for having me. And well, the caravan is moving slowly to in the middle of the state of Chiapas. Now they're basically north of Chiapas, trying to get to Oaxaca. They're moving like very, very slowly. And the thing is, they want to get first to Mexico City to make like a public statement to get asylum from Mexico first before they head to the U.S.
Is there any indication from the caravan where exactly they're going?
They are right now in the municipality of Tonalá. They're moving.
I mean, on the U.S. border.
So the path.
Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah. So going up to the U.S. path, like thinking if they're going to be in Mexico City. I'm hearing they're discussing Texas, not specifically Del Rio, because they know Del Rio has been closed since the ancient crisis that happened around there. So I think they're going to try to move into Texas. They're still not sure where, or maybe to Tijuana. So some of them have been hearing that Tijuana is making camps for migrants right across the border. But I mean, it's still too early to know, because the caravan has been losing people. Have been like, some of them have been going back to Tapachula because of medical reasons. Some of them have been like just going away on their own, trying to go up on buses.
I'm wondering, after traveling with them, is there any talk? You said they didn't want to go to Del Rio because what happened with the group of Haitians who were there. Are they talking at all about that? Because most of the folks in that group in Del Rio were sent back either to Mexico, or many of them anyway, or to Haiti.
Definitely. They are talking about that. They are very aware of what's going on with the U.S. immigration policies. I mean, they're talking on several WhatsApp groups and talking amongst them, watching closely some news, and obviously having briefings by the organizers of the caravan as to what's going on in the U.S. and if they're actually going to try and make it or not.
Right. Have you heard anything about what is being done on the border to prepare for this?
Yes, well, Texas apparently, the border with Texas is preparing to receive a large number of people in caravan, because this will not be the last caravan departing either this year or next year. I know personally that there is another caravan preparing for December and another one for January. So this will not be the last caravan going out. Now, the particularity of this caravan is that there is a lot of families, a lot of young kids, as you are watching in the images, right. A lot of pregnant women, and they are trying to make a point from this caravan to the Mexican government, but also to the U.S. government to receive them.
All right. Immigration and drug trafficking journalist Luis Chaparro. Luis, thanks for your time. We appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Former Secretary of State and retired General Colin Powell's funeral is held today. Powell battled a rare blood condition and died last month at the age of 84 due to COVID complications. In attendance, Presidents Bush, Obama, Biden, and Powell's son, former FCC Chair Michael Powell. He gave tribute to his father, saying, quote, "We can strive to emulate his character and his example as a human being. We can choose to be good." Could lawmakers strike an infrastructure deal tonight? Nancy Pelosi thinks so. We have the latest on that coming up. And the trial begins for Ahmed Aubrey and the men accused of killing him. We have a live update on that as well ahead. Well, after months of wrangling and infighting, Democrats may have reached a deal on President Biden's infrastructure bill and spending plan. Votes expected to move in the House. At least that's what leadership is hoping anyway. NewsNation's Kelly Meyer, following that for us, joins us now with the latest. So Kelly, the word was there was supposed to be a vote tonight. Where does that stand?
Well, House leadership, Democratic leadership there, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi pushing ahead or trying to push ahead with the vote on the bipartisan infrastructure package. But they are delaying a vote on the big social spending bill. And that's where you see the standstill, because progressive Democrats say they won't vote for the bipartisan infrastructure package unless they see a vote on the spending bill. Moderate Democrats say they won't vote for the spending bill until they see the price tag and how much this spending bill will cost. So that's where we see this logjam. The Congressional Progressive Caucus has been in the meeting for the last 2.5 hours, seeing how they're going to move forward with this. We haven't heard from them on camera just yet, waiting to hear what they will do next. President Biden is now trying to whip his own votes. He called the chair of the Congressional Progressive Caucus, trying to get her on board with this, but they are standing firm. They've said all along that they won't vote for this bipartisan infrastructure package until they see a vote on the spending bill. So that's why you see this delay happening up here, Joe.
They want them tied together. We'll see what happens and if there's a vote tonight. Kelly Meyer live for us in Washington. Thanks for the update. Now to policing in America. This week, voters in several cities took on the issue of police reform. In Minneapolis, residents rejected a proposed amendment to replace the city's police department with the Department of Public Safety. The idea went down 56 to 44%. Voters also re-elected a mayor who opposed that measure. But in Austin, Texas, residents voted down an effort to boost the number of police on the streets to tackle the city's growing homicide rate. More than 67% of voters in that city rejected the proposition, which would have required 2 officers per 1,000 people in the city. And in Cleveland, Ohio, voters overwhelmingly agreed to implement an amendment that will create a civilian-led board and community police commission that would have the final say on police policies and discipline. Albany, New York, by the way, also approved a similar measure. For more on all this, I want to welcome in retired Seattle Police Chief Carmen Best. Chief, it's great to see you. It's great to have you. Your home city there, Seattle, also elected several pro-police candidates this week. What's your take on these votes this week, especially the one in Minneapolis? Do you think that went too far?
Well, I was really gratified to see that a number of cities across the country are really voting to make sure that they're supporting public safety in all areas, including adding police officers and looking at other measures to create transparency within the police department. We all know that policing has been sort of at the forefront of a lot of issues over the last year and a half, for sure. So I was very glad to see that people are supporting public safety in this way.
Yeah, I think some of it has been lost in translation anyway. I don't know what you think. What exactly does defund mean to different people versus reform, which people seem to want, Chief, but they also want to feel safe?
Absolutely. And so I think the idea of defunding in the sense that they want to take away officers and reduce budgets is not the way to provide additional safety. Certainly there are reform efforts that can be in place. We all want fair, just, equitable policing that serves us all equally in the community. And so that's critically important, but we also have to have the officers there to respond for calls for service. Additionally, there's a real movement toward having additional resources at that intersection of public health and public safety for people who have addiction issues and homeless issues and that sort of a thing as well.
Right. Let's talk about the book you wrote about your time in Seattle as chief, and primarily about CHOP, because we all saw this, the Capitol Hill organized protest where people took over your precinct. How did that happen? And I guess looking back, would you have done anything differently? I mean, should you have evacuated the precinct and maybe not cleared that whole thing a little earlier?
You know, hindsight is 20/20 in these situations. Obviously, it was a very dynamic and unusual situation. I think we were one of the first cities ever, at least that I know of, to have dealt with that type of occupation, although there have been other movements, but not quite like what we had seen there. And looking back, you know, ultimately, right now, from where I sit, you know, I'm retired, but, you know, the officers are back in the precinct, the area's been cleared out, life has moved on, and so could we have done some things differently? Absolutely. But at the end of the day, everyone is back to normal, so to speak, and no one was hurt, no loss of life or anything like that.
You talk a lot in the book about what it meant to you to be the first African-American woman to be chief in Seattle. I'm wondering about reports that you might be the first woman to be the police chief in New York. How does that happen? Do they call you and say, are you interested, or do you apply?
Well, I think we're dealing a lot more with speculation here than anything else, to be honest with you. But, you know, I've always been close to policing. I know that New York has a new mayor, Eric Adams. Right. I'm very excited for them. I think he's a good person for the job. And ultimately, he'll decide who comes in as a commissioner.
Would you be interested if they offered it?
Well, I'll put it this way. I wouldn't rule anything out.
Okay, fair enough. I just have a few seconds left, and it's a loaded question. But if you can, when you have hundreds of people in a city shooting each other, how does a police chief fix that?
You know, there's a lot of discussion about how to best deal with shots fired. I believe in that, the idea of working further upstream. Often we're dealing with young people or people in crisis. So before we get to the point that we have handguns involved, we should be trying to do some intervention and prevention so that we're not dealing with this proliferation of shots fired that so many cities are seeing.
All right. Former Seattle Police Chief Carmen Best, it's great to have you. Thank you for the time.
Thank you.
Prosecutors today and defense attorneys presented two different portraits of Ahmed Aubrey, who was either an innocent black man out for a jog who was shot by three strangers, or a scary mystery who had been seen prowling around a Georgia neighborhood. NewsNation's Janelle Fort's been covering the trial for us, and she is here now with more on opening statements today. Hi, Janelle.
Hey, Joe. Yeah, two very different portrayals of Ahmed Aubrey. In the hour and a half of the prosecution's opening statements, they said that Aubrey didn't give his pursuants any reason to suspect he was doing anything wrong that day, and that the action of those three men was based on assumption. The defense, on the other hand, said that the shooting was justified, that this was an act of self-defense, that those three men were trying to detain Aubrey, who they thought was committing a crime, until police showed up. And court just wrapped today. It was a busy day one. I want to give a little rehash for anyone who hasn't been following this case. But this 5-minute video sparked national outrage, shot by one of the defendants and leaked months after Aubrey's death. Aubrey was out jogging in a neighborhood here in coastal Georgia in February of 2020 when he was boxed in by the defendants, father and son, Greg and Travis McMichael and their friend William Roddy Bryan. The McMichaels, carrying a shotgun, say they suspected Aubrey was stealing from homes in the neighborhood and attempted to make a citizen's arrest. They say Aubrey was trying to wrestle that gun away, and they shot him in self-defense. Now, the three men, they're being charged together with murder and other charges. Race is a central issue in this case. And controversy loomed over the trial leading into today after 11 white jurors and just one black juror were selected, despite Glenn County being more than a quarter black. Court today was riddled with technical issues, problems with counsel and jurors being obstructed from seeing some of the evidence due to where they were in the courtroom. But perhaps one of the most powerful moments in court today was the whimpers from Ahmed Aubrey's mother as she watched that viral video of her son's last moments for the first time.
I've watched the video for the last 18 months, and I thought it was time to get familiar with what happened to Ahmed. I'm the last minutes of his life, so I'm glad I was able to stay strong and stay in there.
A busy.
Now, they were able to call the first witness. Oh, sorry.
No,
sorry, Joe.
That's all right. Go ahead.
They were able to call the first witness to the stand today. It was an officer, one of the first responding officers to that shooting, and court resumes on Monday, Joe.
All right, an emotional and busy day. I was going to say, Janelle Fort, thanks for the update. Should lawmakers have to submit to a cognitive test when they reach a certain age to detect the signs of Alzheimer's or dementia? Former American ambassador to the UN, Nikki Haley, is making that argument. For one, it comes after both Presidents Biden and British Prime Minister Boris Johnson were caught nodding off during this week's climate summit in Scotland. Here's what Haley, bring in Democratic strategist Max Burns and editor-in-chief of the Washington Examiner, Hugo Gurdon. Max, let's start with you. I don't know that it's fair to talk about people falling asleep with jet lag over there, but that's maybe another topic. But this certainly, according to Haley, is something that is not being disrespectful. She said it's just a fact. Do we need this?
Well, this is Nikki Haley sort of dipping her toes in the QAnon waters that seem to imply that Joe Biden has dementia or some other mental problem. And honestly, she may need to get a test herself. She seems to think it's a law that candidates have to provide their tax returns. And I wonder where she was these past 4 years
well, we
when
learned
President
that's not
Trump
the case,
refused to. Exactly. But this is when we have so much to work on as a country. To make this the priority is unserious.
Hugo, what do you make of this? I mean, we know that this was actually, speaking of former President Trump, he had the situation where, what was it? I don't even remember now. Camera, man, TV, or something like that. I don't even know that I'd pass this thing, to be honest with you. But is this something that you think everyone running for office should do?
You know, look, I don't. I'm somewhat skeptical about putting in sort of higher authorities than the voter in deciding who should be in office. So I think ultimately, it should be up to the voter. I don't think that medical conditions should be hidden. It seems to me very clear that Joe Biden is too old for the job. He's 78 years old. It's not the time at which anyone should be taking on the most important job in the world. It's a very demanding job. And there's all sorts of evidence that he himself is putting out there, which suggests that he's not entirely in charge. He was contradicted, sort of semi-contradicted anyway, on the Wall Street Journal report about payments to illegal immigrants who were separated, etc. So, there is reason to believe that he's not completely up to the job, but it's up to voters to decide.
So, remember the Greater Oregon movement? We've covered it here on the broadcast. The story about counties in eastern Oregon trying to leave Oregon and become part of Idaho. Well, another county has joined the list, becoming the 8th to join the movement. Been a little while since we checked in with our friend Mike McCarter. He's back tonight, Greater Idaho president. It's good to see you again, Mike. So another county is on board here, voting yes. What's the latest? Sounds like you're picking up some steam.
Absolutely, it is rolling. On top of the poll that came out of Idaho, where 51% of the people versus 35% were willing to accept us. So now we've got 8 counties signed up. We've got 2 more counties that I'm just turning the petitions in this next week to get them on the ballot. So we're moving on. It just keeps going.
Yeah, so what's the process here, Mike? What's next? Because I know ultimately both state legislatures in Oregon and Idaho have to sign off on this thing, and Congress ultimately. But what's ahead next?
Well, we've just had again, last week, after this vote has taken place, one of the state senators has come forward and said 100% behind it and is going to introduce some type of legislation into the next session, which starts right after the 1st of 2020. So our goal is to continue on with the counties and then get this talked about in the Oregon legislature and the Idaho legislature, because that's where the decisions makers are.
Right. Do you think that the votes that you're taking right now might be enough to sway these state legislatures, especially Oregon, to say, yeah, sure, we'll cut out 2/3 of the state here?
You know, I don't know if it's going to sway them, but the goal is to get them to talk about it, at least to bring the subject up. And, you know, it shows that you have a problem, Oregon leadership, in rural Oregon. You can choose either to deal with it or ignore it like you are now and just keep on lording over the rest of the rural Oregon citizens. So we're working at it.
Yeah.
We're not stopping. It's going to keep going.
Yeah. Well, what I appreciate about you, Mike, is that you're realistic. I remember you telling me early on, you knew this was a heavy lift. You understood that. It still feels that way to me. But I think, you know, it's hard to argue that you're making progress.
More and more people who have been sitting on the sidelines are starting to jump in and to support the issue. And after one of your earlier interviews there, I'm kind of worried, because I'm 74 years old. I might have to go through one of these cognitive tests to find out whether or not I can move Oregon's border.
I think you're doing a pretty good job based on the election results you're seeing so far. Hey, Mike McCarter, it's great to see you from beautiful Lapine, Oregon. Take a deep breath for me. Love that
Yes.
Oregon freshness.
Hey, thank you very much. Thank you. We enjoy it.
All right. It's good to see you, Mike. Take care. Thank you for watching. Click the red subscribe button below so you can get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.